Caught my stepdad cheating with a pregnant coworker. We got him fired, jailed for driving without a license, then he lost it all. OMG. Initials for clarity: me. 24 male, me my mother, 50 female, mom my brother, 23 male, bro my sister, 30 female, cis cheating stepfather, 45 male, Chris stepfather's coworker, 25 female, Betty the other woman, approximately 40 female, Darla. This may be lengthy, my apologies in advance. I relocated to live with my mom after her marriage of 25 years to my biological father came to an end. He was a manipulative jerk, but that is a different narrative. Soon after the divorce, my mom introduced me to her then boyfriend, Chris. My mom worked as a corrections officer at the county jail, and Chris was a former inmate who had been incarcerated for a DUI. This should have raised immediate concerns, but my mom was grieving the end of her long marriage, and I did not want to bring it up. Chris appeared to make her happy, and that was sufficient for me. My siblings and I moved in with my mom and Chris, and we seemed to get along reasonably well. Chris and I shared a connection over our love of video games, and everything seemed fine. That is, until 2017. Due to Chris's previous DUI, he was required to make regular probation check-ins at the courthouse. One day, he did not return, and we became somewhat concerned. We then received a phone call from him, and he was calling from Texas. It turns out that when he arrived at the courthouse that day, the FBI apprehended him. His family from Texas was involved in various gang and drug-related crimes, and because he had been present in a vehicle during a drug deal, he was also implicated. He ultimately agreed to testify against his family members in exchange for a reduced sentence, allowing him to be released from prison before the trial. My mom was devastated, and through numerous phone calls over the course of a year, they discussed their plans for marriage upon his return. His store owner at the Dairy Queen, where he worked, permitted him to return to his position as manager as well. Shortly afterward, the drinking began. Given his DUI, it was clear that Chris was no stranger to alcohol. He started increasing his consumption to the point where he was consuming half a 24-pack of beer each day. Chris became a belligerent drunk. He often initiated fights when intoxicated, and while they never escalated to physical altercations, his words were far from kind. My mom enabled his behavior for years, claiming that stress from work and the upcoming trial was affecting him. Finally, after several years, my mom reached her breaking point. One night, Chris came home extremely inebriated and she confronted him. When she asked if he had been drinking and he did not deny it, she kicked him out. He went to stay with a friend temporarily. The next morning, Mom asked us to help gather some of his essentials so he would not have to return home until he was sober. While we were collecting his belongings, we heard a knock at the front door. We opened it to find Betty, one of Chris's coworkers and someone I had attended high school with. She informed my mom that she had something important to disclose. After sitting my mom down and advising her not to reveal the source of her information, Betty told her that Chris was having an affair with Darla. She explained how he often had Darla perform sexual acts in and around his workplace. Betty had caught them together, and Chris had warned her that if she ever told my mom, he would fire her. He was the store manager, after all. And finally, she revealed that Darla was pregnant. My mom was furious. Once the initial shock wore off, she instructed us to gather all of Chris's belongings and to throw them outside. We collected everything of his from the house and discarded it all in the alley behind our home. Chris had no right or means to return to the residence. It was a rental with only my mom's name on the lease, so there were no legal issues. In the meantime, she contacted him and confronted him. He admitted to the entire affair and expressed happiness about Darla's pregnancy, as it meant that he would finally have a child of his own. My mom had refused to have more children. The three of us had already placed a significant strain on her body, and another pregnancy would likely be life-threatening for her. He declined to apologize for any of his actions. My mom arranged for him to collect his items from the alley, with a police officer present, and he departed from our lives. The revenge now, my mom clearly desired to put the past behind her and move forward. She was already quite emotional from everything, wanting nothing more to do with him. However, my sister, brother, and I had different ideas. First, we contacted his workplace. Dairy Queen operates as an independently owned franchise, and the owner of this branch owned several locations in the area. He was also a good friend of ours. We informed him about the sexual activities occurring on the premises, and he took steps to have Chris terminated from his position and barred him from all of the branches in the area. Ironically, Betty received his position after he was let go and now runs a tight and reputable establishment. Chris was left without a job or a place to stay, prompting him to move in with Darla in a town about an hour away. We discovered that he started working at another Dairy Queen in that town and informed the owner there about the situation. It took significantly longer to address since there were no ongoing inappropriate activities at that location, but eventually, he lost that job as well. Not long after, Chris began driving around our neighborhood, seemingly stalking my mom and our family, likely due to his job loss. However, because of the situation in Texas, he never had his probation lifted for the DUI, meaning he still did not possess a valid driver's license. He had never needed to drive while living with us, as work was nearby and we could drive him as required. Yet here he was, clearly driving around alone when he was not supposed to be. We contacted the police and informed them of Darla's vehicle in our neighborhood and our belief that Chris was driving it without a license. We requested that they pull over the vehicle the next time they spotted it, as it was likely Chris behind the wheel. Sure enough, a few weeks later, we learned that Chris was indeed pulled over and taken back to the local jail for driving without a license and while under the influence. The police also conducted a search of the home where he was staying and discovered several firearms on the premises. As a felon, he was legally prohibited from possessing weapons, resulting in additional jail time. By the end of his jail sentence, it was just in time for him to return to Texas for the trial. Chris's son was born while he was in prison. Darla evidently realized what a terrible person Chris was and severed ties with him while he was incarcerated. During his time in prison, Chris began sending numerous letters to my mom, expressing how sorry he was, begging her to take him back, and ranting about how it was not his fault, all within the same letter, mind you. My mom burned every single one of them. We moved on and relocated out of state. Chris was released from prison several years ago and now resides in Kansas, struggling and fighting against child support, which Darla sued him for. My mom has since found a new boyfriend who treats her well and cares for her much more than Chris ever did. My siblings have moved on and out, while I continue to live with my mom, helping her with the newly purchased home that we have been renovating. Life is looking better. I was reminded of this situation by a conversation with a coworker about infidelity and thought I would share it here for others to appreciate. Edit formatting. Story 2. Ordered to fix a grill without tools, supervisor ignored my concerns. Junior electrician tried anyway, broke it. I stuck to my guns. Here is another amusing account regarding my preferred supervisor from my time in the Navy. To provide some context for the ensuing events, in the military, every piece of equipment must undergo preventative maintenance to keep it in optimal working order. In the Navy, we utilize a meticulously organized maintenance system with detailed instructions for every maintenance task, designed to be so straightforward that even a monkey could execute it. These procedures specify required tools, parts, materials, and testing apparatus, and are exceptionally precise, outlining everything from the length specifications of screwdrivers to the brands of gauges used. The management system used by the Navy for this purpose is called the Maintenance and Material Management System, abbreviated as 3M, or the Planned Maintenance System, commonly referred to as PMS. As an electrician, we were responsible for all electrical distribution equipment on board, and for tasks that did not require electrical training, we also owned the actual equipment. This meant that electronics technicians who had electrical training could manage their own electrical gear. However, the cooks, identified as culinary specialists who lacked electrical knowledge, relied on us for the maintenance of their equipment. If you have ever operated a commercial flat-top grill or griddle, you will know that it is set to a specific temperature rather than a simple 0-9 dial like a home stove. A key aspect of maintaining the griddle involved checking the calibration of this temperature setting once every year or two. I can't recall the exact frequency, but it wasn't very often. Relatively soon after I boarded the ship, a young electrician's mate fireman, designated as Emphin Gwen BD-94, was tasked with performing this maintenance check. Consequently, I gathered all necessary tools, parts, and materials. Unfortunately, I was unable to locate the correct temperature sensor for our calibrated gauge. We had the round-tipped ambient temperature probe for use in the ovens, but lacked the flat-tipped surface temperature probe needed for the griddle. I sought assistance from another supervisor, who was not my preferred supervisor, but he could not locate it either, so we placed an order for a replacement, and he offered to handle the paperwork for the maintenance check. Being new and unfamiliar with the system, I accepted this and did not question the absence of the maintenance check from the following week's list, implying someone completed it. When the maintenance check came due again, we were on deployment, and I was assigned the task once more. By this time, we had a new supervisor, and I had been promoted to electrician's mate 3rd class, or M3, Gwen BD 94. I was somewhat more knowledgeable now. I searched our storage for calibrated equipment, but could not find the flat top temperature probe needed. Upon asking my supervisor, I learned that we had one on order, but he was unaware that we had one in the shop, and he instructed me to figure it out. Aware that this was an illegal order that could result in misrepresenting the check and potentially cause me issues later, I firmly stated that I would not carry out the maintenance without the proper equipment. Since he could not legally insist, we began documenting that tools were on order and postponed the maintenance check. This situation persisted for approximately 2 to 3 months until the check was on the brink of going red, falling out of periodicity and negatively impacting our maintenance reports, and I received another order to solve the issue or face formal reprimand. I refused once again and escalated the issue to my supervisor's superior. Together, we searched the shop thoroughly to find the necessary equipment, but were unsuccessful, resulting in his instruction not to worry about it. Later that week, while I was performing my duties as a roving watchstander after dinner, I spotted a newer, even more junior electrician, let's refer to him as Timmy, in the galley working on the griddle. I stepped into the galley and inquired about his activity, and to my surprise, he was completing the maintenance check. I asked him which temperature probe he was using, and he presented the one designated for the oven. I explained the existing issue and cautioned him that signing off on the maintenance check with the wrong probe would constitute gun decking, falsifying official paperwork, which could lead to repercussions for him. However, I allowed him to make his own choice as an adult. He chose to proceed with the check. I found the situation amusing and continued with my duties. After my watch ended, it was nearly 10 p.m., prompting me to retire for the night. About an hour later, I was awakened with the news that my supervisor needed my presence in the galley. I sighed, anticipating that it was regarding the maintenance check and that I might receive that previously threatened write-up. After dressing and arriving at the galley, I found the entire electrical shop gathered to troubleshoot the griddle. It turned out that Timmy had reached the stage in the planned maintenance system where he needed to use a screwdriver to adjust a dial to ensure the thermometer read the same temperature as indicated by the set temperature. Upon measuring, he found a disparity of approximately 150 degrees, which prompted him to increase the heat. Eventually, the temperature rose high enough to damage the griddle's built-in over-temperature protection device, resulting in the stovetop shutting down. It became evident that he required that temperature probe after all. I was assigned to assist in devising a solution since the griddle was essential for the cooks, and we lacked replacement parts. I asked Timmy if he had completed the final steps of the maintenance card, including turning off the grill, reassembling it, and reporting the maintenance's completion. He admitted that he had not. I turned to my supervisor and stated that since the maintenance check I had specifically advised against conducting without the proper equipment was still open, and considering I was informed I could either proceed with the maintenance or face a write-up, I would maintain my original stance and decline to perform the maintenance. He could write me up in the morning during business hours, but for now I was going back to bed. I wished him a good night. The following morning I was indeed written up, but for insubordination, not for refusing the maintenance check, while my boss's superior observed with a broad grin, clearly pleased with my adherence to principles. Meanwhile, my supervisor was furious with me. Ultimately, I was vindicated. We were not able to conduct that maintenance check without the appropriate equipment. This remains one of the write-ups I am least embarrassed to have received, and I would gladly endure it again to convey a resounding, "I told you so," to inept middle managers. I eventually discovered an electronic record of the counseling documentation my supervisor received for tasks related to maintenance completed without the correct equipment, as I had established that this was a known issue we had been facing for years in regards to not having the right probe. This led to significant consequences for him. We obtained the correct probe approximately 6 months later. In summary, I was instructed to complete a task I could not perform or face a write-up. I refused. Someone less knowledgeable was drawn into the situation. A malfunction occurred. I was directed to assist with repairs. I stated I had already accepted the write-up for opting out of this task, and I ultimately received the write-up. Story 3. Went through my boyfriend's phone. I would sincerely value anyone taking the time to read this. I have no one to confide in about my feelings, and this situation is consuming me. I, 23F, went through my partner's 23M journal tonight while he is out of town. Before anyone criticizes me, I understand that this is wrong. You do not need to remind me. I am already feeling guilt and shame, so there is no need to add to that. I believe my urge to read his journal stemmed from a sense of distance I have been feeling from him lately. When we do not spend as much time together, I tend to become quite anxious and insecure, likely due to attachment issues or something similar. This feeling has been exacerbated by his current absence. Whenever I experience anxiety like this, I begin to reflect on a significant conflict we faced early in our relationship. Essentially, there was only about a month between my meeting him and him being rejected by a girl he had strong feelings for. They decided to remain friends and were still communicating when we started dating. He did not effectively communicate with me regarding their friendship. He hid his messages, and she was unwilling to meet me, which resulted in numerous trust issues between us. Ultimately, he chose to end their friendship to protect our relationship. However, I never received ample information or clarity regarding their past. He assured me he no longer had feelings for her, and that I was the first girl he truly loved. But whenever I inquired about the specifics of their relationship, like why he had liked her, how close they had been, and so forth, he was quite vague and merely stated he did not remember. I eventually managed to move past this, particularly because he severed ties with her ultimately, but it set our relationship on uncertain footing. Since then, we have had to revisit this issue periodically whenever I feel anxious, as it helps to calm me. For the past year, things have improved significantly. I have not experienced anxiety often, but tonight, those feelings of anxiety and distrust resurfaced, compelling me to snoop. I limited my reading to the entries from the time they were in contact. In his journal, I discovered that he had significantly minimized his feelings for her and the depth of their relationship, which had long been my suspicion. There was also one outright lie. He had stated he had only kissed one girl before me, and it was not this girl. Upon reading that they had actually kissed, my heart sank. I can understand why he would choose to lie to me, as the truth would surely hurt me, just as I feel now, but I am very upset that he lied. I suppose I was never completely satisfied with the information I had regarding their relationship, especially given the disruption it caused in ours. I did not realize that my lack of closure and clarity was still having an impact on me, but evidently, it is. I am uncertain what it will take for me to fully move past this issue. I feel an overwhelming need to know every detail about what transpired between them and what he genuinely felt, as I sense I cannot compel him to provide me with the truth, which is ultimately why I read the journal. Update. I continued reading entries from prior to our meeting, 4 years ago, and discovered that he had been conversing with far more girls before we met than he had disclosed to me. He only mentioned about 3 girls. In his journals, he discussed numerous girls, including those he encountered on Tinder and at our college, expressing admiration for their beauty and charm while enjoying their texts. He communicated with several girls simultaneously, even referring to some as backups in case his current crush did not work out. I feel utterly disgusted. He did not inform me about any of this when I inquired about his history with girls. I was completely open about my own history, which is minimal, as I attended an all-girls high school. I am at a loss regarding how to proceed. He has told me that he has changed significantly since we first met and feels like a wholly different person now. I believed that to be true, but I never envisioned that the kind, nerdy guy I know would have once been so obsessed with girls. How much can people truly change? I have always had a gut feeling that he had some obsession with girls. He was just so charming from the beginning. Someone without much experience with girls would not be that smooth. We became physically intimate early in our relationship, and now it makes sense since all he discussed in his journals during that time were intense dreams involving girls and desires to kiss them. Why? On top of that, he deceived me about his past for such a long time. I am unsure how to respond. Technically, everything occurred before we met, but he has never shared any of this with me, despite our many discussions about our dating histories. I have told him about every boy I liked. Furthermore, he stated he had never engaged in anything physical beyond kissing with anyone. That was also a lie he had made out, and become physical with a girl he claimed he had only kissed briefly. He is the first guy I have ever been with, and understanding the truth about his physical history is extremely important to me. It is hard to believe he lied about this too. Have I been dating a pathological liar and playboy for the past 4 years? I do not mean to exaggerate, because I know that people on Reddit tend to take things to the extreme. To be clear, he is also a loving and wonderful partner. There is a reason I have been with him for so long. I just did not realize he had deceived me regarding his romantic past with girls. The manner in which he spoke about girls in his journal was so different from the person I know. He seemed to enjoy juggling multiple girls simultaneously, with the intention of potentially dating, discussing their attractiveness, and talking about other girls even while having a crush on someone else. I understand that this may seem immature, and while it was years ago on paper, he has not committed any crimes aside from deception. I recognize that talking to several girls and being curious as an 18-year-old boy is not inherently wrong. However, I feel shocked because this is not the person I thought he was at all. I never would have imagined he would engage with this many girls at once at any point in his life. I feel utterly deceived, as though I do not know him at all, and I am uncertain what else he may be concealing from me. I believed he was this pure and innocent guy, but I was terribly mistaken, and I am unsure how to process this realization. How can someone be in a relationship for 4 years and still feel as though they do not truly know their partner? Is this behavior typical for men his age, and do they genuinely evolve as they mature? I am uncertain what I am seeking here. I simply request understanding and kindness rather than criticism for having looked through his journal. I might be on the brink of a mental breakdown over this. You have to understand. This is my first relationship, which has significantly shaped my college experience. I thought he was the love of my life. He may still be, but I do not know. I need to discuss all of this with him to determine if we have a future together. I have invested so much in this relationship, and now I am questioning everything I believed to be true. I am also reevaluating my judgment as a naive young woman who has been sheltered from men throughout my life and jumped into this relationship during the first month of college. At the same time, I cling to the beauty of our relationship, as we are best friends who make each other incredibly happy. Perhaps I am deceiving myself about that as well. Who knows? In any case, I hope you are having a better night than mine and actually managed to get some much-needed sleep. Thank you if you took the time to read this entire message. I genuinely appreciate it. Story 4. Take the money I give for bills and squander it. Hope you like the court system. Due to recent developments, the story is no longer my intellectual property, but rather belongs to another individual, as they have reached out to me and acquired the rights to this narrative. If you are interested in utilizing this story for a YouTube video, TikTok, or any other media platform, please contact me, and I will pass along all relevant information to the rights holder. The background. I resided with a group of individuals whom I believed to be my friends. There were 2 couples, David and Tina, and Brittany and AJ, and we all shared the same house for nearly 2 years until I recently relocated. I was the only single individual in the group. We debated how to handle our bills, but ultimately decided that each person would contribute money to the individual responsible for the bill. David covered the mortgage, Tina took care of the water and electricity gas, and I handled the internet payments. Eventually, I found myself bearing close to 80% of the mortgage, the entirety of the water bill, approximately 75% of the gas and electric charges, and the internet bill as well. While I continued to pay my share to the designated bill holder, I discovered about 10 days before moving out that the mortgage was defaulted and the house was in foreclosure. Additionally, the water, gas, and electric accounts were at constant risk of disconnection, with the only current bill being the internet. Despite witnessing my struggle to keep up with these expenses, they were thoughtlessly spending money during the day, which was when I was sleeping due to working the third shift, so I never observed their frivolous purchases, nor did I see the mail since they collected it before I awoke. Brittany never contributed financially as her paycheck was being garnished due to unpaid student loans. However, she always possessed expensive makeup. AJ held a job for no more than 2 weeks at a time, while David and Tina frequently called in sick, knowing I would not let them become homeless due to our shared history. One day, while they were out running errands, I decided to check the mail as I was expecting a package. I came across the bills and decided to investigate further. Upon opening the gas and electric bill, which came from the same company, I was shocked to see a total amount approaching $400 and a disconnection notice. I was furious and knew exactly what was happening. At that moment, I vowed to pay them back as best I could. The revenge: I had just interviewed for a new job that offered nearly double my current salary, and I felt confident about my interview. I promised myself that if I received the job offer, I would give them 30 days' notice and move out before the 1st of February, as it was nearing the end of the month, and I had already provided them with my share. The next day, I received the job offer, which I gladly accepted. I completed the paperwork for the background check, and everything came back clean. On the same day I accepted the offer, I drafted a 30-day notice and recorded myself, with my phone tucked in my breast pocket, handing it to them while explaining my intention to move out. I began my new job and started the search for an apartment near my new workplace, which I found within a week of starting. I set aside most of my paychecks for rent, deposits, and basic essentials I would need. Despite being asked several times to assist with the upcoming month's bills, I refused, explaining that I was preparing for my own place and that they had ample time to gather the funds among the 4 of them, particularly since I was managing everything largely on a meager hourly wage of $11 before my new employment. This led to numerous scowls, passive-aggressive behavior, and outright attempts to take or use my belongings or food without consent. The day finally arrived when I rented a U-Haul and enlisted a few friends to help with the move. I offered free beer and lunch as compensation. Determined to complete the move in one trip, I opted for the largest vehicle available, and we packed everything up. I collected all my belongings, down to my beloved pizza stone, which they adored, my expensive kitchen knives that they used without cleaning, and even the toilet paper I had purchased just 3 days prior, as a few rolls were quickly taken by them. After relocating everything, I sank down onto my couch, my cat on my lap, and breathed a sigh of relief. I was good friends with my former neighbors. We frequently shared smoke breaks, so I asked them to keep an eye out for anything unusual. 4 days passed, and I learned that the gas, electricity, and water had all been turned off, leading them to resort to filling buckets to manually flush toilets, bathe, etc. Both couples owned dogs, which my cat despised as they were extremely hyper, but I had a soft spot for them, and I worried about the dogs' well-being since they had no water, heat during the winter, and likely no food as I had purchased the last bag about 2 weeks earlier. I couldn't stand to see an animal go hungry. Therefore, I contacted the local humane society and anonymously reported my concerns regarding the dog's welfare. The following day, my neighbor Todd messaged me to inform me that the dogs had been removed from the house, that my former housemates were being charged with neglect, and that due to the lack of utilities, these charges were classified as criminal, not civil. This news brought me joy, but I wanted more. I knew David was divorced and had a child, but was neglecting to pay child support. I reached out to the local courts to inform them of his blatant non-payment, hoping they might assist the agency seeking him. I provided them with our former address, highlighting that it was the homeowner who was being pursued. Consequently, it became apparent that he was nearly $25,000 in arrears, which constitutes a felony in my state. Now, he is couch surfing at someone else's place, As Tina has left him, the house has been foreclosed, and he owns nothing while facing multiple criminal charges. The moral of the story is this: do not exploit a friend who knows all your dirty secrets. In summary, my housemates misused the bill money I entrusted to them, and I did my utmost to dismantle their lives in return.